Welcome to Artist Tales, the podcast that features and celebrates artists from different walks of life. I'm your host, Heather Martin, and in this episode, we're threading through the life and work of textile artist, writer, and educator Eilish Henderson. Based in Tyne and Wear in North England, Eilish is best known for her emotionally resonant stitch portrait collages and mixed media pieces that fuse ink, watercolor, and personal fragments of fabric and memory. Her practice, described as narrative art, draws from old photographs, travel memorabilia, and childhood ephemera, each element woven into a deeply personal visual story. Welcome, Eilish.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you as a guest. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, so I was born in Northern Ireland during the sort of trouble, so it was quite a war-torn time. I was home taught as a child, and I think that really increased my creativity. Because of the situation over there, it was very much a period of unrest. So my parents chose to make sure that I was safe at home during that time. And my mum took on basically most of my education. And I remember, although we kept very closely to the curriculum, it was very much a creative input to that curriculum. So there would be very much English literature, art, as well as the other subjects. But those were very much pushed as a child. And I think that kind of started me off in that way of being curious in that form. And then as I grew up, I wanted then, of course, not to be taught by just mum. So I went to college to study fine arts and happened to get a textile arts tutor stand-in one day. And that was Julia Tristan. Some of you may know that name. She had pink hair and was quite punky in style. And that kind of warmed me to her as a young person. I think I was a bit rebellious and I thought, oh, this is interesting. And she was very much art textiles. That got me interested. So it was very much monoprinting onto fabric and paper. So it was little bits of things that I was familiar with anyway on paper, but she just transcribed onto cloth as well. And then, of course, having come from a background where actually my mum and grandma were very much into sewing and making their own clothes and things, but had tried to get me to do that, but to no avail as a child. I would come home proudly with these little pieces of embroidery and things that I'd done in my class. And my mum was like, well, why? I could have taught you this all along. But I think it takes someone outside of your home sometimes to get you interested. That's kind of where I started out. And then from that age, sort of 16 onwards, I then ploughed through an art education. I went on to do different college fine art courses, but then some mixed media, some textile art. Then went on to study my more formal education in textiles and did my degree in textiles, but kept it very much with a fine art edge and very always with the undercurrent of the narrative. So kind of that's where the education side of things comes in.
It sounds like you have had a real influence, or a number of people, key people in your life have really influenced your interest in art and, particularly the textile art. So was there anything in particular about textiles that you're particularly drawn to, or is that just something, is that a medium that, because you've had exposure to, you just kind of picked up?
I really don't know, because when it comes down to it, I love drawing and painting as well. But I think it was the idea that it could have a little bit of a mixed media edge. Yes, in another life, I'd love to just do absolute textiles as well. But I love to mix media. I love to see what you can do with media. For instance, I'm very into I like the idea of things that should be on paper, putting them onto fabric just because I can. So a few years ago now, I was doing some etching work at a printmaker's because I'm very into sort of the drawing side of things still. And I was doing some portraits of my grandmother. And I decided that I was going to put some old vintage pillowcases through the roller presses that had only ever been used for paper. And they held their breaths as the roller went through. And I didn't know if it would work or anything, but it did. And it was that idea that, oh, wow, I could actually make a drawing onto cloth and then add extra at that time. So it's that idea of play, I guess, the curiosity. I've always loved Alice in Wonderland as a child, and I think it was that kind of seeing what was behind the next corner drives you on, really. That idea of always having that interest. And I think that comes with having a real love of textiles, a genuine love, not just doing it for art's sake, really, or for money's sake. And I think I always knew as I was coming out of, I remember the panic coming out of sort of those years of A-level art, thinking, what next? I can't leave this. I can't just go on and have a 9-to-5 job and do what normal people do. I have to be an artist. But how do I be an artist? Because you can't just sell your own work and expect to be famous with it. And again, that was how I got into teaching, which is kind of another subject there. So I'm getting onto a different tale there.
So before we get into your teaching, I was just, when I was listening to you, what struck me was kind of a certain freedom in what you're saying in terms of, and we'll get on to kind of themes you're exploring. You're right, it is mixed media. So you are using, textiles, using ink and watercolors and that sort of thing. So it kind of feels like it gives you a bit of freedom to explore the themes that you're exploring in your artwork.
Yeah, I think you're right. And when I'm hearing you say that, it's the word freedom. Now, that's an interesting one because I've been this week and next week, I'm leading a workshop online, and it's on sort of the idea of capturing the magic of someone. And I've had a lot of questions surrounding how I don't overthink or overwork work, and how do you know when to stop? And I always think of it as there's enough to overthink in life. And when it comes to art, if that's the only thing that we've got in our lives that we don't overthink, then keep it. And for me, it was never about being the perfectionist within my art. So I never try to make perfect. I try and just think, well, there's enough anxiety in everyday life. Just enjoy the freedom that you can dabble. And again, it's that childhood dabble. If I'm going away, say, for a few days, maybe a caravan break or something, they will always be packed. There might not be a needle and thread there because that might be an extended project, but there'll always be the start of something that's maybe just a pen and paper or some watercolor palette. There'll always be something that you can just dabble with, like a child dabbles when, maybe they've gone out for the day and they just paint what they see. And that's what I enjoy about art. It's that freedom. You don't have to put constraints on yourself. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but yeah.
Well, I think it does in many ways. Now, I did mention in the introduction, some of the themes that you're kind of looking at or exploring, things like memory and, your childhood, or childhoods, not necessarily yours, and in kind of having a very deep personal visual story. So could you tell me a little bit more about how you explore themes and kind of explain more about your themes that you're looking through?
Yeah, I think I'm quite a sentimental person, but explain to it from a few different strands. One, it's very much about never having arts for art's sake. I could never be someone. I'm always someone who's genuine, honest, and I can't be dishonest within my own work, neither to myself or to my audience. So although I'm not going to say this is how I feel on this day on paper and I'm going to write it for everyone to see, I will probably weave that thought within my work. For example, I might say use a fabric or a cloth that I'm very much drawn to because it's personal. Maybe it's an item, for instance, maybe it's something that's passed down from a family relative, like a grandmother. I was very close to my mum's mum, and a lot of my work is based on her. So she died when she was just before her 100th birthday a few years ago. And that grief, you can put that into your work. Not that you automatically talk about the grief in your work, but it might just be woven through there, that might be subliminal. And a lot of that is about kind of celebrating ancestry, who you are, working out who you are as a person, but also where you've come from. So there's a lot about that in my work, and that example of kind of making, I guess, a level of security through your work. Recently, I've been looking at my dad's side of the family, because his mum and dad really died before I was born. And because of his upbringing, it was quite a boarding school, quite a posh upbringing. So he didn't really know much, or he didn't get his time much with his parents. He wasn't close to them. And because of that, I don't know much about them. So he can't tell me much about them, but that made me even more curious. And again, it's interesting when you're an artist, other people would look at their family tree and think, oh, I'll just do it for the ancestry sake of it. But for me, I've been looking at it from an art side. And, what can you say about someone in an artistic mannerism when you don't know them very well? But technically, they are your relative. So there's that link, but that's all you've got. And you've just got what people have told you about them. For instance, I can look at a picture of his mum and there's a certain warmth there. I know she was a nice person. I know that she was kind to animals. I know that she enjoyed playing bridge. I know that she was Scottish and that she wore bits of tweed and she was very quintessentially Scottish. But apart from that, I don't know anything about her real personality. And I think there's that kind of element that can really fascinate you. So art can become almost an Agatha Christie Findy Outy project as well. And that it's that kind of sentimentality and fragility that you can bring into your work. And again, personal narratives. Art can be a therapy. It's not going to take away your problems. No, it's not going to fix them. But it can become a way of getting through a problem. For instance, my father, he's still around to tell the tale, but he had cardiac arrest about a decade ago. And at his bedside, he was hospital bound for a good few months. But I often used to stitch at his bedside, and it used to irritate the life out of him watching me do these intricate stitches while he couldn't really potentially move. But for me, it was therapy because it was something that I could negotiate and was in control of. So there's a lot that art and textiles, I say art because it's the generalized term. I don't try and go, oh, it's textiles, or oh, it's fine art, or oh, I think art can be across boundaries. Whatever form of creativity you take on, it can be a real blessing for you that you maybe need more at certain times in your life than others, but it'll always be there, ready to pick up again.
And I find that really interesting because then what I'm hearing is it sounds like art is the avenue for you to explore your family history, family tree, but also it's kind of that intergenerational history, the personal history, memories, or lack of, or gaps in memories, or not having those memories, and the curiosity as you've spoken about earlier, and I think it's quite natural for many people, most people, if not everyone, to kind of understand where do they come from, but also find a way to how to actually interact with that. And yeah, I think art also has an element of mental health in being able to deal with things as well. So I'm kind of hearing different aspects to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I was talking to someone just today and we were getting some class ideas together for some teaching in the community, and there are a lot of vulnerable ones who do enjoy textile art or art-based creativity, and that's really good, but it's how much they can maybe overshare or share during that class and how much that is allowed, disallowed, or whatever. But the thing is, it can be a therapy to a level without getting too deep into that. And I think it can be made just a light moment for someone, that it doesn't have to be that we talk about anything or worry about anything at the time. It's just, it's a bit of a release. It's a bit of a distraction. It's a nice glimmer in the day if you're a bit stressed. It doesn't have to be any big deal that's going on in your life. It can just be, it's a nice break. I know another artist who teaches in people's lunch breaks, and they have that hour where they're eating their lunch and they're able to sew at the same time. And it's that kind of element of creativity where it becomes a little bit of a relaxing medium, I guess, a break in a day, something different, but you also feel like you're getting somewhere with something. It can be a community thing as well, as I'm sure you're aware. It can bring people together. There's all different angles to it that it can become if you want it to become.
And I think that's the beauty of art in the sense it can be the light end of things of, an hour's lunch break or 15 minutes. I just need a bit of a break from work, let's say, to actually then maybe the other side of it, to explore, I don't know, some of the mental health strains that people perhaps are grappling with and needing to express, or, even some of the community art in terms of, expressing, let's say, I'm thinking Grenfell, the tower block in West London that burnt down 8 years ago. I've heard of the Grenfell quilt, which is a community initiative to really I guess, allow the community or give space to the community to have that collective grief and work through it, but also give it a voice.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably a lot of different aspects to art, and it can go, from the light, as you say, through to other things that can be a bit more serious.
Yeah, I'm reticent obviously to say book titles, but there is a book coming out soon that discusses that topic and the idea of protest. And it can be a voice for anyone. It can be a way of being allowed to say something in a way. And that can be, again, a real release for someone or a real empowerment. So it's amazing, really. Art sounds so gentle on paper, doesn't it? It sounds so sweet and light and just something that maybe you might enjoy when you're at school, but it can be so much more. I think that's what I would encourage. What I hated to see as someone growing up was art was never encouraged by a lot of parents, maybe teachers. It was always seen as the subject that maybe you would do if you weren't very good at other subjects. I think that's a shame because art can give you a life that certainly no advertisement for it making you riches, but it can make you a life in a different way. It can make you happy. And isn't that the most important thing? You can find a way if you're intelligent enough just to make a living out of it, or maybe by a slight side job if you need to, but you should do what is happy in this life, really, because it goes fast.
It does, yeah. Life does go by too quickly, probably in some aspects. But I think, I do hear what you're saying, and I feel a bit disheartened at the moment because in the UK and elsewhere, not just in the UK, the classes in school that get cut are the arts classes, whether it's drawing or that sort of thing, through to the music. And even if you don't pursue it as a career, the benefit for people is astounding, and it gives people exposure to perhaps, even if they don't explore it immediately, to then further down the line maybe explore it later in the future, or at least give them a bit more of a balanced view in the world. But also some of the people who I know who are very scientific or very technical in whatever field they're technical in can also be incredibly, incredibly creative people, whatever that art form is. So I think it's a bit short-sighted just to see people as one thing or another, because we want to develop well-rounded people.
Exactly. And I think what that brings to light something that often happens in the sort of class workshop situations that I teach. I have a little bit of levity inside sometimes, and I try and work out what everyone's career is outside, what everyone's job is before they tell me. And then I'll ask them generally within the class. And generally, by the way that they come to their creativity, I've got it on head. Whether they're very much into, say, you get teachers, you get ones who, yes, they are mums and just maybe they are the stay-at-home mums, but often you get ones that are looking into other things, theology, or they'll come into it from some other angle. And you'll see it with what they produce, even if it's just very subliminal. For instance, you'll get what I've had chemists come into some of my classes, and they are very, very detailed, very analytical. Find it very hard to break free of the straight line. And it's interesting to see and learn what everyone's career is just because of the way they've come to art, whether they're free or very caught up in themselves. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I think the art can reflect the personality of the person.
Yeah.
It does, I think, in so many different ways. You now have touched on teaching, so you have touched on it a couple of times. So you said earlier on that when you finished schooling, you thought, how am I going to make it as an artist? And you were drawn to the teaching. So it sounds like that was the route that you decided, I'll start that way and then possibly expand, or tell us a bit more about that journey.
Some days you feel like you're having, a breakdown as an artist inside because you have got too many forks going on. Because to make ends meet, I've been editor online for arts magazines. But at the same time, I've been teaching outside of the home and doing 101 other different roles. And it's just, you do anything that can make ends meet in an artistic mannerism. So teaching, I love, because I always forget how much I love it because I find it very nervous. I want my students to enjoy it, and that can create a lot of anxiety before you actually go into a classroom and you think, oh, have I done this lesson right? Or are they going to enjoy it? Have I brought the right equipment? Have I brought enough equipment? And because you care. And I think you create art because you care, and that can really leave its mark on your emotions as well, because you want to teach and give the best that you can give. So for me, teaching, I do a lot of teaching online as well, which I find a lot easier now, especially since COVID that's come out, and that's been a real blessing. So you don't have to obviously travel far. So you can then teach different audiences, sometimes worldwide audiences, and sometimes you will get a different type of audience because they are online, and that maybe those are the ones who can't get out themselves into a classroom. So there's all those different scenarios, as well as in person, getting to do, like last weekend, I was in an art gallery teaching, and that's lovely for its own sake. So that there is a multifaceted idea of how you make ends meet. And that's really where I came out of being 16, 17, 18. I did my first days. I taught the knit and stitch shows around 18, giving myself mini heart attacks because I'd taken on far too many classes all at once. Yeah, I was probably very inexperienced, but thought I knew at the time. And I think you live and learn, and gradually you come less and less and less, or more if you can. So it's getting it right. And then for me, it's been about working out, getting a balance. And I still not got that balance right, no. But you get a little bit of teaching. I know how much I can take on personally, at what level I can cope with, how much I take on, and then how much I do maybe writing in textiles. Obviously, coming from an education where I loved English literature, the narrative, the story, I always can go back to that and love the idea of journalism, writing about other people's textiles. So there's all those angles that you can do. It's just important to remember you can't do them all at once.
And I'm just wondering, you mentioned the teaching. Is it more adults, or is it kind of a range of ages?
I have always taught more adults. When I was a lot younger, I started off teaching children, and that was lovely for its own sake, but I've always found it more rewarding to teach adults, or at least those who have decided to take on textiles or art themselves, especially those who pay for courses maybe rather than maybe the schools, because they don't just have to be there. So that's quite a nice, I guess it's luxury as well in a way, but it's nice to be able to teach people who really want to learn, and then we'll come to it from that, because often it's not that they know anything, it's just that they're coming at it a bit more zealous to learn. So that can mean that they're more responsive. You can feel like you're getting somewhere with them. But as I say, I'm not to say that I would never teach children again, but at the moment I'm teaching more adults, yeah.
And you've touched on the writing. It sounds like more journalistic kind of writing. So could you tell us a bit more about the writing?
I enjoy finding out, I guess, as a bit of a curious and nosy person, other people's stories, or where they've come to their own art or practice. And I say art practice because I think you can bring anything into it, whether it's anything from your garden to nature to anything. It's interesting to find out about these multifaceted lives. And also I do a lot of book reviews, and sometimes reading about other artists and authors who have come to it from different points of view. I remember reading one about a man who was a gardener, but he was also an artist. It's that kind of knowing what's more about someone helps you understand their art better. And I think that's better than going into maybe an art gallery and we just see a name on a wall and we don't really know what's behind that painting, but it's a whole life out there that is underappreciated. And I think that's what's lovely about when you get to see people's sketchbooks or interview them. You'll get that a lot yourself. So there is that kind of area where you get to find out more about the person and appreciate the person. And then consequently, you can appreciate their art better because you know what's behind it.
And how much does the teaching and the writing and the research influence your own practice?
I would say influence is a large part of it, because often when I'm teaching students who are maybe at a very low level, maybe they've never really done narrative arts or looked at portraiture before, but it makes me itchy. It makes me itchy to want to go home and create. And I'll be honest, it doesn't very often happen these days. I hope that I'll come back when I get a bit more space. But as artists, you do go through a period of time where that's a horrible expression, but you work off the back of your old art. And it's not that it's not good. It's just you're constantly reflecting back on what you've done previously, because you haven't got time or space in your life to create the new. And you can do that for a while. And then you think, no, I need to create more for my own health's sake and emotion's sake. I don't want to talk about old and the past anymore. So it's, again, getting that balance as an artist. And again, I guess it all fluctuated into the book Narrative Textiles, which I made, and that got published last year. So that in itself was really a happenstance where you feel like you've a lot of your work's been lost, or just that's been it. But then it can get really appreciated by a new audience. And that's nice, because as an artist, you'll appreciate you can only have so many exhibitions, and that work is just going to get stored. But if you can talk about it in a book's sense, then that book can be delivered into a lot of homes, and a lot of other people can see it who you'd never have reached before.
And what sort of engagement or feedback have you gotten about your art or your writing or some of the other avenues that you've discussed?
I think I've always prided myself on being a nice person. And I think that's what I've got from workshops and things, even the one I'm teaching now. I think being someone who's approachable and who's just a nice person to be with in a class setting, who makes them feel maybe secure or relaxed. Things like that are really important to me. It's about your name. I was brought up very strongly. I think it was my mum's upbringing as well, from that side of where her dad, you would never bring anything on the family name. I think that strikes down to an art's name. If you try not to upset anyone within your artistic practice, that can be maybe always making sure that you try. At least I've made mistakes, believe me, in the past, of always appreciating someone else's artist and using their name if you're showing their painting to someone, as an example of something, and maybe as a past student, things like that. You always try and use them and get their permission for things. So all those little things that give you a name as an artist, but more as a good person, can make you into a more appreciated artist. And that's the kind of feedback I get. I get a lot of feedback about the kind of what people see in my work, maybe the fragility of the nature or the emotion that is backed up in the work. And it's interesting what people can see into work that you haven't thought was there as well.
I think that's probably common for a lot of artists, that feedback of what people actually see in your art.
Yeah.
So looking forward, what's next? Where do you think your career will take you?
I came off writing the book and thought, oh, I'll write another book. And yes, I think I have got other writing within me, but you also need to take a break. And as an artist, I think I need to allow myself the time to create new work. So then you can have something to give others again. So it can be a period of maybe learning for yourself so that then you can give out again. So for me, I think thinking this year, the next few years, looking at, yes, the odd exhibition work, the odd bits and pieces, see what comes along the way. Teaching work is a constant. See, making sure that you can get some form of income out of it, but also being able to maybe do my MA form of study, and I'll be choosing to do that in fine arts, but then mixing media as well. So there'll be a lot of different angles to bring to the table again, but maybe being after a period of education for me as an artist, so that then I can give out as a better human to other people.
It sounds like you have, some plans or some things you want to work towards, which is always positive. Thanks, Eilish. It's been great having you as a guest and talking to you about your journey as an artist.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice to talk to you and discuss the work and remind myself as well.
Thanks for tuning in to my conversation with Eilish. I hope her reflections on textiles and writing offered you a fresh perspective on how art can hold memory, identity, and transformation all in one stitch. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out Eilish's website and social media presence. Links are in the show notes. If Artist Tales is finding a place in your creative life, spread the word. Share it with friends and fellow makers. In the next episode, I'll be speaking with Suki Hewlett, a multi-award-winning storyteller-photographer whose work explore themes of home, community, and social justice. Rooted in British social documentary tradition, Suki's visual narratives shine a light on everyday lives and overlooked voices, inviting us to see the world through the lens of empathy and connection.